My name is Henry Whitaker, but for as long as I can remember, everyone has called me Grandpa Henry. I'm 71 years old, and on what should have been a gentle ending to Christmas Day, standing on my front step, waving goodbye as my family drove off, something inside me finally understood the truth. They promised they'd be back. Just a short visit, one last stop before the night was over. I stood there long after the taillights disappeared, listening to the quiet settle back into the house I once filled with laughter. Hours passed. No phone call, no message. By Christmas night, I wasn't waiting anymore. I was remembering. Every moment I'd been overlooked, spoken over, slowly moved aside. Tonight, I'm going to tell you what my family did to me. How being left alone wasn't an accident. And how that empty night led to a knock on my door that changed everything I thought I knew. Because just before midnight, someone I had never met stood on my porch, holding a letter with my name on it, written years ago and never meant to be found. That letter revealed why I was really being pushed out, and it placed something back into my hands that my family assumed I no longer had. Choice. But before I continue, let me ask you, have you ever realized too late that someone was hoping you wouldn't notice their absence? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. To everyone who listens, who understands the quiet pain of being left behind, thank you. Your support means more than you know. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. This channel exists, so stories like this don't disappear into silence. Now, let me take you back to that knock on the door, the stranger who brought it, and the decision I made before Christmas night was over. The turkey was still warm when they left. I remember that detail because I was standing in the kitchen, wrapping leftovers in aluminum foil, when I heard my daughter Linda call from the living room. "Dad, we're heading out now." Her voice had that brightness to it, the kind you use when you're trying to make something sound casual that isn't casual at all. I set down the foil and walked into the room where, just 2 hours earlier, we'd opened presents around the tree. The wrapping paper was still scattered on the floor. My granddaughters, Winifred and Rhoda, were already bundled in their coats near the door. Linda smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Desmond's mother is expecting us for dessert," she said. "You know how she gets if we're late." Desmond stood behind her, keys already in hand, checking his watch like a man with somewhere important to be. He'd barely spoken to me all evening. Every time I tried to start a conversation, he'd nod politely and find a reason to step away. I looked at Winifred. She was 16, old enough to see through the performance, but too young to know what to do about it. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Sadness, maybe. Or guilt. "You'll come back tonight, though?" I asked. "You said—" "First thing in the morning, Dad," Linda interrupted, stepping forward to hug me. She squeezed tight. Too tight, like she was trying to convince herself of something. "We'll have breakfast together, I promise." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But as I stood there with my arms around my daughter, I felt the weight of every excuse she'd made over the past 6 months. Every canceled visit, every phone call that went to voicemail, every time she said she was too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed. "Drive safe," I said, pulling back. Rhoda hugged me next, quick, distracted, already thinking about wherever they were going. But Winifred held on a little longer. When she pulled away, she whispered something I almost didn't catch. "I'm sorry, Grandpa." Before I could ask what she meant, Linda was ushering them out the door. I stood on the porch and waved as their SUV backed out of the driveway. The Christmas lights on the neighbor's house reflected off the snow, turning everything soft and golden. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like watching something die. The taillights disappeared around the corner, and I stood there in the cold, listening to the silence that follows when people leave and don't plan to return. I went back inside. The house felt different now, bigger, emptier, like it knew it had been abandoned. I walked through the living room, picking up stray bits of wrapping paper, folding the blanket Linda had used on the couch. On the mantel, next to a photo of my late wife Martha, sat the small wooden box Linda had been asking about for months. Martha's memory box. Linda wanted it, said she was organizing family heirlooms. But something about the way she asked always felt wrong. Too insistent, too urgent. So I'd kept it where it was, untouched since Martha passed 2 years ago. I picked up the box now, running my fingers over the carved initials on the lid. M.W. Martha Whitaker. Inside were letters, old receipts, photographs from our early years. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Couldn't bring myself to. My phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket, heart lifting for just a second. Maybe they were coming back after all. It was a text from Linda. Dad, something came up. Desmond's mom isn't feeling well. We're going to stay with her tonight. We'll call you tomorrow. Merry Christmas. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the couch and stared at the Christmas tree, its lights blinking in the darkness. Tomorrow came. No call. I texted Linda in the morning. No response. I called in the afternoon. Straight to voicemail. By evening, I tried Desmond. He answered on the 5th ring, sounding distracted. Henry, hey, yeah, Linda's been swamped. We'll touch base soon, all right? He hung up before I could respond. 3 days passed like that. 3 days of silence. 3 days of me sitting in this house, pretending I didn't know what was happening. Because deep down, I did know. I'd been watching it happen for months. The slow, deliberate distancing. The way Linda stopped asking about my doctor's appointments. The way Desmond started talking about memory care facilities and downsizing. The way they looked at me like I was a problem they were trying to solve. On the 3rd night, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in Martha's chair by the window. I thought about calling again. I thought about driving to their house and demanding to know what I'd done wrong. But I didn't. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered something Martha used to say. Henry, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. And that's when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks on the front door. It was 11:47 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. For 3 days I'd been alone in this house, and the only sound had been the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. So when those 3 knocks cut through the silence, my first instinct was fear. Who comes to an old man's door at midnight? I set down my glass and stood slowly, my knees protesting the movement. Through the frosted window beside the door, I could see a silhouette. A woman, I thought, judging by the height and build. She wasn't moving, just standing there, patient and still. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. She was maybe in her mid-50s, dressed in a long wool coat dusted with snow. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she carried a leather briefcase in one hand. She didn't look dangerous. She looked professional, like a lawyer or a businesswoman who'd gotten lost on her way to somewhere important. I cracked the door open, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" She looked up, and her expression was calm, almost sympathetic. "Mr. Henry Whitaker?" she asked. My chest tightened. "Who's asking?" "My name is Manfred," she said, pulling a business card from her coat pocket and holding it up so I could see. "I'm an estate attorney. I apologize for the late hour, but I have something that belongs to you, something that couldn't wait any longer." I stared at the card. The name Manfred & Associates was embossed in gold lettering. "I don't need a lawyer," I said. "I'm not here to sell you anything, Mr. Whitaker." Her voice was steady, almost gentle. "I'm here because your late wife, Martha, retained my services 2 years ago. She left specific instructions regarding a letter she wrote, a letter meant for you." The world seemed to stop. Martha? I hadn't heard anyone speak her name in weeks. "What letter?" I asked, though my voice barely came out. Manfred reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. Even through the crack in the door, I could see the handwriting on the front. Martha's handwriting, unmistakable and elegant. To Henry. Open only when the time is right. My hands were shaking as I undid the chain and opened the door fully. "How?" I started, but couldn't finish the question. Manfred stepped inside, brushing snow from her shoulders. Mrs. Whitaker came to my office in October, 2 years ago. She was terminally ill, as you know. She wanted to make sure certain things were protected, certain truths were preserved. I led her into the living room, my mind spinning. Martha had been sick for 8 months before she passed. Near the end, she barely had the strength to get out of bed. When had she found the time to visit a lawyer? And why hadn't she told me? Manfred sat on the edge of the couch, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. I stood, unable to sit, clutching the back of Martha's chair for support. She instructed me to hold this letter, Manfred continued, and to deliver it to you under one very specific condition. What condition? I whispered. Manfred's eyes softened. That your family stopped visiting, that you were, by her definition, abandoned. The word hit me like a fist to the chest. Abandoned. She knew, I said, more to myself than to her. Martha knew this would happen. Manfred nodded slowly. She suspected, and she wanted you to have a choice when it did. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. The seal was still intact, the paper slightly yellowed with age. I ran my thumb over Martha's handwriting, feeling the weight of whatever was inside. There's more, Manfred said carefully. The letter explains a financial arrangement your wife made, a trust fund established in your name from her family estate. You weren't aware of this inheritance, were you? I shook my head. Martha's family had money, but we'd never needed it. We'd lived simply, comfortably. She never talked about inheritances or estates. The trust is worth $470,000, Manfred said. I felt the floor shift beneath me. What? Your wife structured it carefully. The funds become legally yours only if you meet the abandonment clause, if your children cease contact or care for a period of no less than 30 days following a significant holiday or family event. My mind was reeling. And if I don't meet the clause? Then the trust defaults to your daughter, Linda, upon your death. Linda. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The questions about Martha's belongings, the interest in the memory box, the way Linda had been subtly pressuring me to get my affairs in order. Desmond's talk of downsizing, of care facilities, of making things easier for everyone. They knew, or at least Linda knew. Did my daughter? I couldn't finish the sentence. Manfred hesitated. Mrs. Whitaker believed Linda may have become aware of the trust. She didn't have proof, but she had concerns. That's why she hid this letter with me, to ensure it reached you, not your daughter. I sank into the chair, the envelope still clutched in my hands. 3 days. They'd left me alone for 3 days, and in that time I'd crossed some invisible threshold Martha had set 2 years ago. She'd known what Linda would become. She'd known, and she'd protected me anyway. What do I do now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I was asking Manfred or myself. Manfred stood, closing her briefcase with a soft click. You read the letter. Then you decide what kind of man you want to be, and what kind of family you're willing to fight for. She handed me a second business card. When you're ready, call me. There are options, legal pathways, but the first step is yours, Mr. Whitaker. She left as quietly as she'd arrived, the door closing softly behind her. I sat alone in the dim glow of the Christmas tree, holding my wife's final words. And for the first time in 3 days, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt dangerous. If you've made it this far, you're invested in what happens next. And I need you to know, this is only the beginning. In the next chapter, I open Martha's letter, and what I find inside doesn't just explain why I was left behind. It gives me a weapon. Subscribe right now, because you need to see what my wife knew, what my daughter was hiding, and how a 71-year-old man plans his revenge. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated, and drop a comment telling me, would you open that letter right away, or would fear stop you? Now let's continue. I didn't open the letter right away. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe longer, just holding it. The envelope felt heavier than paper should feel, like it contained more than words, like it contained the last piece of my wife I'd ever receive. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight. Christmas was officially over. I slid my finger under the seal and opened it carefully, the way you handle something fragile. Inside were 3 handwritten pages in Martha's elegant script. Just seeing her handwriting again made my throat tighten. For a moment, I couldn't read through the blur of tears. Then I blinked them away and began. My dearest Henry, if you're reading this, it means I was right. And God, how I wish I'd been wrong. It means Linda has left you. Not physically, perhaps, not all at once, but in all the ways that matter. She stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped seeing you as her father and started seeing you as an obstacle. I know this will hurt you. I know you'll want to make excuses for her the way you always have. You have such a good heart, Henry. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with you 50 years ago. But that good heart has made you blind to something I've watched growing in our daughter for years. Greed. I stopped reading. Greed. The word sat there on the page like an accusation I wasn't ready to accept. Linda wasn't perfect. I knew that. She could be impatient, demanding, always worried about money. But greedy, that was something else entirely. I forced myself to keep reading. Last year, before I got too sick to manage things, Linda came to me asking about my family's estate. You never knew this, but my grandmother left a trust fund. One I never touched because we didn't need it. It was always meant to be passed down quietly, without fuss. Linda found out about it somehow. She asked me detailed questions. How much, where it was held, who controlled it. When I told her it would go to you after I passed, her face changed. Just for a second. But I saw it, Henry. I saw something calculating behind her eyes. That's when I started planning. My hands were shaking now. I went to see Manfred, the woman who delivered this letter, and set up a conditional trust. The money is yours, Henry, all 470,000 of it, but only if certain conditions are met, only if Linda proves what I suspect she's become. The abandonment clause was my insurance policy. If Linda truly cares about you, if she stays present and loving, then the money will pass to her when you're gone, just as I originally intended. But if she disappears, if she pushes you aside to speed up her inheritance, then you deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to protect yourself. I've also discovered something else. Desmond has gambling debts, significant ones. Over $180,000 from what I was able to piece together through his careless conversations at family dinners. I believe he's the one pushing Linda. I believe he sees you as a resource to be liquidated. Henry, I'm telling you this not to hurt you, but to prepare you. Because if I'm right, Linda will try to move you into assisted living. She'll say it's for your own good. She'll talk about your memory, your health, your safety. And slowly, carefully, she'll take control of everything you own. Don't let her. You are stronger than you know. You are sharper than they give you credit for. And you deserve to spend your final years with dignity, on your own terms. Manfred will help you if you ask. She has resources, legal options. But the choice has to be yours. One more thing. There's a second letter hidden in my memory box. The one on the mantel. It's underneath the velvet lining in the bottom. That letter is for Linda. I wrote it months before I died, when I still had hope she might change. If you decide to confront her, you can use it, or you can burn it. Either way, you'll know I tried to save her from herself. I love you, Henry. I have loved you every day of our marriage, and I will love you beyond this life. Don't let them erase you. Forever yours, Martha. I sat in silence for a long time after I finished reading. Then I stood, walked to the mantel and picked up the memory box. My hands were steadier now. I pried up the velvet lining at the bottom, and there it was. A second envelope, sealed with Linda's name written across the front in Martha's handwriting. I held it up to the light but didn't open it. That letter wasn't for me. But knowing it existed, that changed everything. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Linda's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I stopped. No, I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to ask why she'd abandoned me or plead for her to come back. If Martha was right, if Linda had been circling me like a vulture, waiting for me to become vulnerable enough to control, then calling her now would only show weakness. Instead, I opened my messages and typed slowly, deliberately. Linda, I found something of your mother's today. Something she wanted you to have. Come by tomorrow. We need to talk. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came faster than I expected. Tomorrow's not good, Dad. Maybe next week? I stared at the screen. Then I typed again. It's about your inheritance. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, what time? I smiled, a cold, bitter smile that didn't feel like mine. 10 a.m. Don't be late. I set the phone down and looked at Martha's photograph on the mantel. You were right, I whispered to her. You were right about everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, planning. Linda arrived at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. I watched from the window as she and Desmond pulled into the driveway. They sat in the car for a moment, talking, Linda gesturing with her hands, Desmond shaking his head. Then they both got out, and I saw something I hadn't noticed on Christmas. They looked tired, desperate even. Good. I opened the door before they could knock. Dad! Linda's smile was too bright, too forced. She stepped forward and hugged me, and I let her. I even hugged her back. You look good. Have you been eating enough? I manage, I said, stepping aside to let them in. Desmond shook my hand, firm, professional, like we were business associates instead of family. Henry, good to see you. I led them into the living room where Martha's memory box sat on the coffee table, deliberately placed in the center where they couldn't miss it. Linda's eyes locked onto it immediately. Is that? She started. Your mother's box, I finished. Yes. She sat down on the couch and I watched her hands twitch toward it before she caught herself. Desmond sat beside her, his jaw tight. I remained standing. You said something about an inheritance, Linda said carefully, trying to sound casual. Failing. I did. I picked up the box and held it, running my fingers over the carved initials. Your mother left instructions. Did you know that? Linda's face went very still. What kind of instructions? The kind that make me wonder how much you knew before she died. The temperature in the room dropped. Desmond leaned forward. Henry, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything. My voice was calm, measured. I'm asking a direct question. Did you know about Martha's family trust? Linda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Dad, Mom mentioned something once, but it was vague. She never gave me details. How much did she mention? I don't remember exactly. Try. Linda glanced at Desmond and I saw it. The thing Martha had warned me about. That flash of calculation. That moment where she was deciding how much truth she could get away with. She said there was money set aside, Linda admitted slowly. From her grandmother. But she never told me how much or where it was. I assumed it would come to you when she passed. And after me? Well, yes, I suppose so. I set the box back down on the table, directly in front of her. What if I told you the money is already mine? That Martha structured it so I'd receive it immediately upon certain conditions being met? Desmond's face went pale. Linda blinked. What conditions? I let the silence stretch. That's between me and the lawyer handling the estate, I said finally. But I will tell you this. Your mother knew things, about both of you, things she documented carefully. Desmond stood abruptly. Henry, if you're accusing us of something, I'm not accusing anyone. I looked directly at him. I'm just curious why you haven't been by to visit since Christmas. 3 days, Desmond. Not even a phone call. We've been busy. With what? He faltered. Linda jumped in. Dad, Desmond's mother has been sick, remember? We told you that. You texted me that. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the message, reading it aloud. Something came up. Desmond's mom isn't feeling well. Funny thing, I called her yesterday to check in. She answered on the second ring. Said she hadn't seen you at all over Christmas. The color drained from Linda's face. She must have been confused, Linda said weakly. She's been having memory issues. She remembered talking to me just fine. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. She also remembered that you've been asking her about my health, about whether I'm managing okay on my own, about whether I might need, what was the phrase, professional care. Desmond sat back down slowly. Linda's voice cracked. Dad, we're worried about you. This house is too big for one person. You're alone here, and if something happened, you'd inherit faster. The words hung in the air like smoke. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, I thought, though I wasn't sure anymore. How can you say that? You're my father. I love you. Then why did you leave me alone on Christmas? She didn't have an answer. I opened the memory box and pulled out the second envelope, the one with her name on it. Your mother wrote you a letter before she died. She gave it to me to hold until the right time. I held it out to her. I think that time is now. Linda reached for it with trembling hands. But before you open it, I continued, I want you to know something. I've already spoken with Martha's lawyer. I know about the trust. I know about Desmond's debts. And I know that you've been planning this for months. Desmond shot to his feet again. You don't know anything. $180,000, I said quietly. That's what you owe, isn't it? Online poker, sports betting. You've been hiding it from Linda's accounts, filtering it through your business expenses, but Martha found out, and she made sure I would too. Desmond's face went from pale to red. You can't prove. I don't need to prove anything. I looked at Linda. I just need you to understand that your mother saw who you were becoming, and she gave me a choice. Let you take everything, or fight back. Linda was crying now, clutching the unopened letter. What do you want, Dad? She whispered. I sat down across from them, feeling every one of my 71 years. I want the truth. I want you to open that letter and read what your mother said to you. And then I want you to decide whether you're going to keep lying to me, or whether there's still a daughter in there worth saving. Linda's hands shook as she broke the seal on the envelope, and I sat back and watched her read the words of a woman who'd loved us both enough to try to save us from each other. Linda's hands trembled as she unfolded the pages. I watched her eyes move across Martha's handwriting, left to right, down, then back again as if she couldn't believe what she was reading. Her breathing changed. Shallow. Rapid. Desmond leaned over to read with her, but she pulled the letter away, clutching it to her chest. Linda. Desmond's voice was tight. What does it say? She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the pages, tears streaming down her face. I knew what the letter said. Not word for word. Martha hadn't shown me, but she'd told me the essence of it the week before she died, when the morphine made her honest in ways she'd never been before. I wrote her the truth, Martha had whispered, her hand cold in mine. I told her that loving someone means letting them make their own mistakes, but it doesn't mean funding them. It doesn't mean sacrificing you. Now, watching Linda read those words, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. Real, deep, bone-cutting shame. Dad, Linda's voice broke. She looked up at me, mascara running, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. I didn't know she knew. I thought I was being careful. Careful about what? I asked, though I already knew. Linda crumpled forward, the letter falling from her hands onto the coffee table. Desmond reached for it, but I was faster. I picked it up and read the final paragraph aloud, the part I knew would matter most. Linda, I'm leaving your father the means to protect himself from you. Not because I've stopped loving you, but because love without boundaries is just permission to cause harm. If you're reading this, it means you've already made your choice. The question now is, will you live with it, or will you fight to become the woman I raised you to be? Your father deserves better, and deep down, so do you. Desmond stood abruptly. This is manipulation. She's manipulating you from the grave. Sit down, I said, and something in my voice made him obey. I looked at Linda, really looked at her, and asked the question that had been burning in my chest since Christmas night. When did you stop seeing me as your father and start seeing me as an inheritance? Linda sobbed. I didn't mean for it to happen. We got so buried. The house, Desmond's business, the girls' tuition, and Mom kept talking about the trust, about how it was supposed to take care of everyone, and I just thought, you thought if I was out of the way, your problems would be solved. No. Dad, no, Then why didn't you come back after Christmas? Silence. Desmond finally spoke, his voice low and bitter. Because I told her not to. Linda's head snapped toward him. Desmond. He deserves the truth, Desmond said, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked me in the eye. I convinced Linda that if we waited long enough, you'd decline, get confused, forget things. Then we could step in, take legal guardianship, and manage everything for your own good. The trust would default to Linda when you passed, and we'd finally be clear of the debts. My stomach turned. You were waiting for me to lose my mind. We were desperate, Desmond said, his voice cracking. I made mistakes, bad investments, worse bets. I kept thinking I could fix it, but it just kept getting worse. And Linda, she just wanted to protect our family. By sacrificing me. Linda stood, her face blotchy and red. I know what we did was wrong. I know that. But Dad, you have to understand. We weren't going to hurt you. We were just going to manage things. Make sure you were taken care of. In a facility, away from my home, away from my life. She didn't deny it. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snowy street where their car had disappeared on Christmas night. The street looked the same, but everything else had changed. When I turned back, I wasn't the broken old man they'd left behind. I was Martha's husband, and I was done being underestimated. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and cold. The trust is mine, all $470,000 of it. Manfred has already processed the paperwork. It's untouchable. Desmond's face went white. But, I continued, I'm not a cruel man. Your mother knew that about me, Linda, so I'm going to offer you a choice. Linda looked up, desperate hope flickering in her eyes. You owe me $52,000. That's every dollar you and Desmond borrowed over the past 3 years. Money you promised to repay but never did. I have the receipts, the bank transfers, everything documented. Desmond opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. I'll forgive that debt, all of it, on one condition. You walk away. From the will, from any expectation of inheritance, from the legal games you were planning. You sign a document with Manfred stating that you relinquish all claims to my estate, now and after I'm gone. Dad, you can't. I can, and I am. Everything I own will go to Winifred and Rhoda when I die. They'll split it equally when Rhoda turns 25. Until then, Winifred manages it. She's the only one in this family who had the courage to apologize to me. Linda's face crumbled. You'd cut me out completely? You cut yourself out when you drove away on Christmas. The silence was suffocating. Then Linda whispered, What if I say no? What if I fight you? I pulled out a small recording device from my pocket, the one Manfred had given me the night she delivered Martha's letter, the one I'd had running since they'd walked through my door. Then I released this recording. Every lie, every admission, Desmond's confession about the guardianship plan. And I make sure every person in your life, Your friends, your neighbors, the girls, knows exactly who you've become." Desmond lunged forward. "You recorded us?" "Single-party consent state," I said calmly. "Perfectly legal." Linda stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe I'd been invisible to her for so long that seeing me fight back was like watching a ghost come to life. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide," I said. "Sign the papers and walk away with a clean slate, or refuse and watch me burn every bridge you've ever built." I opened the front door, cold air rushing in. "Now get out of my house." They left without another word. I watched their car pull away, and this time, I didn't stand on the porch. I closed the door, locked it, and sat down in Martha's chair. For 3 hours, I sat in silence, replaying everything that had happened. Then, just after sunset, there was a knock at the door. Soft, hesitant. Nothing like the confident knock Manfred had delivered days before. I opened it to find Winifred standing on my porch, her coat dusted with snow, her eyes red from crying. "Grandpa," she whispered, "can I come in?" I pulled her inside and wrapped her in a hug. She was shaking. "Mom told me everything," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "About the trust, the letter, what you said today. She's falling apart, Grandpa. She and Dad have been fighting all afternoon. I'm sorry you had to see that." "I'm not." Winifred pulled back and I saw something fierce in her eyes, something that reminded me of Martha. "You were right to do it. They were wrong, and I told Mom that." "What did she say?" "She said I don't understand, that I'm too young to know how complicated adult life is." Winifred's jaw tightened. "But I understand enough. I understand that you've been alone because they chose to leave you alone." I led her to the couch and we sat together in the dim light. "What are they going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. Dad wants to fight. But Mom—" Winifred hesitated. "I think Mom's ashamed. Really ashamed. She locked herself in her room after they got home. I heard her crying." My chest tightened. For all the anger, all the betrayal, Linda was still my daughter. "Do you think she'll sign the papers?" Winifred asked. "I don't know." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Winifred said something that broke me open. "Grandma would be proud of you, you know." I looked at my granddaughter, this brave, honest girl, and felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. It was just there. A fact, like the snow outside or the tick of the grandfather clock. "Your grandmother always said that love means holding people accountable," I said quietly, "not letting them hurt you just because they're family." "Do you still love Mom?" The question hung in the air. "Yes," I said finally, "but I don't trust her, and I won't pretend anymore that those two things are the same." Winifred nodded, wiping her eyes. The next morning, Manfred called. "They signed," she said simply. "Both of them. Linda and Desmond relinquished all claims to your estate. It's done." I sat down slowly. "How did Linda seem?" "Quiet, resigned. She asked me to give you a message." "What message?" "She said, 'Tell him I'm sorry, and tell him I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the daughter he deserved.'" I closed my eyes. "Did she mean it?" I asked. Manfred paused. "I think she did." 3 months have passed since that day. Linda sends letters sometimes. Not often, maybe once every 2 weeks. She doesn't ask for forgiveness. She just writes. About small things. About Rhoda's report card. About a recipe she tried that made her think of Martha. About how therapy is harder than she expected. I don't always write back, but I keep the letters. Winifred visits every Sunday. We cook together, work in Martha's garden, talk about everything and nothing. She's enrolled in college next fall. Pre-law, she says, because someone needs to make sure old men don't get pushed around. Desmond, I haven't heard from, but I hear through Winifred that he's working 2 jobs now, paying down his debts without the shortcut he'd been counting on. As for me, I'm still in my house, still in Martha's chair by the window, still drinking my whiskey and talking to her photograph when the nights get long. But I'm not alone anymore. Because Martha was right about one last thing. Being abandoned taught me who I could trust, and it taught me that I was worth fighting for. On Christmas Eve, 1 year after they left me alone, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find Linda standing there, holding a casserole and crying. "I don't expect you to let me in," she said. I wanted to bring this, and to say, "Merry Christmas, Dad." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I stepped aside. "Come in," I said, "but just for an hour." She smiled through her tears. Just for an hour. I don't know if we'll ever be what we were, but maybe, just maybe, we'll find something better, something honest, something worth keeping. That's my story. A year ago, I was left alone on Christmas night, and I thought my life was over. Instead, it was the beginning of understanding my worth. If this story moved you, if you've ever been overlooked, betrayed, or told you were too old to fight back, subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. And in the comments tell me, would you have let Linda back in? Or would you have kept the door closed? Your stories matter. I read every one. Thank you for listening to mine. And remember, being left behind doesn't mean you're forgotten. Sometimes it just means you're finally free to choose who deserves to stay.